Hey guys, welcome back to the Hocus Pocus podcast, episode 3. In this episode, we're going to be talking about the author's intent and also the last chapter of the book.
So with this chapter, it starts off with the last and oldest sibling, Variah, and it starts off with explaining her occupation of what she goes into, and she is working on different studies and experiments to try and help humans live a longer life. And she says like longevity, and she is doing a lot of testing on monkeys. And if you want to build off of that, Jayla.
Sure. She gets closer to one of her test subjects named Frida, which is this one monkey she helped bring in, and the story kind of is a little subplot is centered around their relationship. And as she's studying, eventually this man or young man comes in, and his name is Luke, and he says he's a journalist and he's wanting to study or not write an article about this experiment that Variah is a part of, since it's very known in the media at the moment, since they're essentially trying to almost immortalize humans. And as the story goes on, she gets to know Luke longer.
And you find out that Luke is not actually a journalist, but instead her son. And as the story goes on, they get closer and closer, and they start to develop like a mother-son relationship.
Luca is Varia's son, Variah, her son, through this relationship she had with her professor in college, and that's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it was very interesting because it showed it flashed back actually to the time of when she was at like the Planned Parenthood clinic, and you get the impression that she goes in and follows through with her abortion appointment. But then later, after Luke kind of tells, or like they both come to like a consensus that they both are related somehow,
She admits that she couldn't go through with the abortion, and she ended up instead giving Luke away because she decided that she wasn't good enough to be a mother.
While this is going on, and she's like, Luke and her kind of come to terms with this, Luke just explains his backstory and what she missed on his life, and the fact that like he was raised on this cherry farm and he indirectly caused the death of his brother, and so they both have like similar, her and him have these like weird quirks because they're both dealing with like,
they have similar guilt.
Yeah, they have guilt in their lives, so they both kind of have like germophobic tendencies. There was like a reflection of that guilt.
Yeah, that's also like a very big thing to mention. Variah's section, it goes into her germophobic tendencies, I guess you could say. Yeah, germophobia. But it shows how she's like constantly washing her hands, and I feel like it's a little bit ironic. She's working in like a science lab and is with test subjects that with monkeys.
At one point, like the monkeys kind of go crazy a little bit, and one bites her and she's like freaking out, and she thinks she's gonna get like, what was the disease?
Tuberculosis or something?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, because she's so like obsessed with it, but then is so easily prone to it, and maybe doesn't even realize it until things happen.
So I guess to go into like why that's a big thing, the longevity research has 2 options for humans to expand their health span and their lifespan, which is either like really suppressing your caloric intake or taking out your reproductive system. Variah went more towards Variah and the Drake, which is the organization that's studying these monkeys, went towards the caloric intake one. And Frida was Frida, the monkey she's connected to, is one of the monkeys that are supposed to take in less calories. So secretly, Variah's doing this on herself, and she makes like little lunch baggies, and she writes down how many calories are in there, and it's like not a lot of food, and she's like getting skinnier from it. They describe her as Yeah, they just described her. She's kind of small and skinny from it.
almost like a greyhound.
Yeah. Like she has very, I think, like thin cheekbones or something like that. But yeah, so this kind of connects to the germophobia thing because she was very like controlling of her life after meeting with the fortune teller, and when she and her son have like a conversation at her apartment, the son like yells at her about this and it's like, you're not really living your life, you're surviving. And because she was so like iffy on like how many germs she can interact with and how many things she can eat, she wasn't really realizing, and she was like kind of projecting this onto her test subjects. And she realized this fully when she walked in on Frida like kind of biting off her arm and like ripping out her hair and just kind of self-harming herself. And she realized like she needed to let Frida live instead of survive, and fed Frida like actual fruit instead of just like, I guess, boring grains and stuff.
Or I was gonna say, Frida wouldn't eat any of the fruit or anything. She kept refusing it.
And she vomited up too.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna.
I don't know. So on the topic, I guess, like living, surviving, that's why I figured what the book was trying to say is a lot of the kids like Simon lived, and I guess to me Daniel kind of just survived, and Claire was like in between that. She was starting to just survive, and towards the end she lived, and I think Varia's a similar story, and that she was just surviving and she didn't really have any passion or joy in life. She was just doing what she felt was needed, and then towards the end she realized that I guess kind of living recklessly is the way towards actually like living and enjoying your life.
I think that also, to add on to the author's intent, it's very intentional of the way that this story is set up, because going all the way back to the prologue, the focus was on Varia, and when all of the kids went to the fortune teller, it was basically through Varia's point of view. So what is that like? What would that
like all
be?
the kids' point of view, but sort of
Yeah. And it was like very obviously mentioned that Varia was by herself, was alone. She felt lonely. She didn't really have a connection to her siblings. Like, she was the oldest, yet Daniel was the one who really took over everything and called the shots and stuff. And I guess now, like, after reading her section, like, it goes to show that she's still the same way, and maybe that could have helped her with how she decided to live her life based on the knowledge she knew about when her time was up.
In the beginning of the book, when we like first started reading, on page 11, like when they're describing when they're first going to the fortune teller, I wrote that the eldest seems dull compared to her siblings, which like I think is interesting that you can see it like from the beginning and like even throughout
As a child,
as a child, like, and even throughout like everyone's parts of like their story or whatever. It's like I think Simon and Clara kind of had the more interesting stories. And I even found kind of like an interview that the author did talking about Varia and how like she wanted her section to end differently than the others. She wanted the book not to be like centered around death entirely, and she wanted Varia's to end differently and like kind of be a healing moment in the book. And I think that's interesting because like I just like how Chloe Benjamin kind of plays with the idea of fate and chance and coincidence and so on, like in the book. And it's kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy that all of the kids go through.
So to go off of how the book was ended, it ends on a note that you don't get the impression, like, Varia didn't die, I'm pretty sure. Like, it didn't give that way at all. Like, with Daniel, it ended like you knew something happened and you knew he got shot or like hurt somehow, and it just was different in that way. And it also ends with Ruby, who is Raj and Clara's daughter, of how Clara would end her acts. And so I thought the intention of that, and it's kind of wholesome because it's like there's a different legacy being brought on, which I think is special, especially for that family, because there's not a lot of them left. And she's a part of the new generation. And I talked about this before, but I really hope that, like, if Chloe Benjamin makes another book for this to go off of it, that she starts off in the new generation of the Gold family, I guess, and goes into maybe Robert's Simon's old partner. And so I hope there could be more point of view from him and from Ruby. Definitely I want a book from Ruby's point of view, or just like her life, and also Luke, now that he's a part of the story.
And Myrtle has 2 other kids now.
Oh yeah, that's
too.
right. I forgot about her.
Yeah, because she got remarried after Daniel died. Yeah, I guess that goes in meaning too, like just passing the mantle to other people. And I guess like in all ways, the people that they get to pass on sort of live their life in their own way. I guess that's why I think Daniel lived the life the least, because he didn't really get to pass on with children on his own. Not that like you're not living your life, say, if you don't have kids, but just the symbolism of that.
Question for you guys. Do you think that's the reason why she ended the book the way she did, so it can be open for sequels?
I personally definitely think the way that she wrote the end of the book was for a sequel, because she left a couple threads, both with Ruby and with Robert, because they talk a little bit about it at the end of the book, and she kind of tells his story and like how he's married now, but like they don't go too much into it.
Yeah, because everything eventually comes into a loophole. You can't read one section without having the mention of another character. Like, it's always bound to have every single character that was brought up is mentioned in all the other sections. And I think something about that is kind of special, because, like, even though there's, like, 7 characters, maybe more than that? I can't count.
4 main and other.
Yeah, but, like, it doesn't seem like a lot of characters based on the way that they're all integrated into the story, and of how they like just do their own thing in each of the sections.
Thank you guys for tuning in to our latest podcast. The Hocus Pocus gang, thanks you guys for listening. And I hope you tune in maybe sometime in the future if we ever do this again. Thank you guys, and this is
The Hocus Pocus!
Spirit supernatural, a shy, what's all the buzz? The bags of bones seem so unsafe, it's semi